Welcome to The Future We Need and How to Get It. All over the world and right here on the Central Coast, people at all levels of society are coming together, stepping up to assure that we have a future, and one we can all live with. In this 7-part series, we look at stories of their successes. Each month, we focus on one of 7 sources of citizen power: beliefs and understandings, innovations, economics, the rule of law, community power, strategic social action, and emergent systems change. In each of these systems, deep changes are urgently needed, and citizen actions with the potential to achieve these changes are well underway. We tell the story of what it is they're accomplishing so far. Each story gives guidance, greater focus for our own efforts, and grounds for the conviction that these efforts actually can coming together, result in the future we need. Not utopia, just survival, reconnection, restoration, and systems no longer rigged against us. A future where those who come after us will have a much better chance of fulfilling what is best in them. I got into this because Matilda Rand, the producer of community television, asked me a year ago to do a show. And I really got into how for the last few years, I've been dealing with the question all of us are, what can we do? There are problems everywhere of all kinds. What can we do? Oh my God, what can we do? And then the question shifted. Well, what can we do? And I started looking all over the world. I had actually been doing it for a while, more and more, to see how are people meeting human needs? How are people seeking to change the world? And actually found all kinds of potential. But as I got into it, I ran up against something else that was getting in the way of our doing what we might. And that was that underneath, we didn't believe it was possible. In fact, it's really hard to do political action when underneath you think it's actually not going to achieve what you're trying to achieve. I found indeed 5 beliefs that are disabling. The first is that meeting human needs destroys the earth. The planet's better off without us. The second, that our problems are overwhelming in their complexity and inherently insoluble. And the third is that even where we can find promising solutions, we don't have the money it would take to bring them to scale. And even if we find the money, we don't have the power to put that money where it's needed. And finally, most fundamentally of all perhaps, that we're the problem. Our species are hopelessly divided. Our very nature is just too violent, greedy, indifferent, or foolish to do what's needed. That cripples us more than anything anyone from the outside can do to us. So this first show is devoted to changing the story, changing that story in ourselves, first of all. There is a statement by Alex Steffen. He makes the point, optimism is a political act. Those who benefit from the status quo are perfectly happy with a large population of people who think things are never going to get any better. In fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. What is really radical is being willing to look right at the magnitude and difficulty of the problems we face and still insist that we can solve them. Yes, optimism is a political act, but mere wishful thinking is not. What we need are real solutions, ones that can allow us to take action, knowing that we're going in the right direction. Solutions that can stand up to the toughest of our challenges and scale up to turn a wildly imbalanced, unjust world, verging on global suicide, into one that works for all. And that is what this series is about. We're going to look at all of the sources of, first of all, finding out what's possible. So it isn't just optimism in shifting our attitude, it's getting out there and finding out what is working. And you'll see on the screen the book Hope in the Dark, which is a very powerful way of addressing the feelings that we're having. Owning Our Future, which is a very profound look at how movements around the world are reclaiming not only our power, but bringing wealth back into our communities. Viking Economics, which is a deep look at how is it the Scandinavian countries seem to continue to stay kind of at the top of social well-being. It didn't just happen because it's in their genes. 100 years ago, they had to take hold as a society and work together to make that possible. And lastly is Eric Liu's book, You're More Powerful Than You Think, where he looks at the laws of social power. And we'll come to that in more depth in another show, but right now I want to note the second law of power is that power, social power, tends to justify concentration through stories that are everyone, even the oppressed, buy into. And so a political act is to change the story. And that's the theme for this month's show. Change the story, change our future. But as I said, you can't just make it up. You've got to look for sources. And one of the things that is happening is a major movement towards positive journalism. Yes Magazine and a half dozen others that we'll be sharing with you later are resources because you have to get out and do your own research. Every time you hear the bad news, which is partly manipulation of our feelings that disempowers us, we have to get out and do the research and find out all these things that are working around the world, because it's not on the nightly news, but it is the revolution that is occurring underneath. Starting with the very first disabling belief that the planet is better off without us and there's no way we can meet our needs as human beings without destroying the planet. I'm turning to a very recent book out by Paul Hawken called Drawdown. In this, he provides 80 to 100 proven solutions that taken together would accomplish both the meeting of our human needs even better than now and reduce the amount of carbon down to pre-industrial levels. The effect of that is that within a generation, we would be restoring normal temperatures to the planet, and a generation after that, we would start having, the world would start stable, our climate would be stabilized again. We wouldn't get the ice caps back. That takes an ice age. That is just one of the best examples I know of. And we're going to watch a brief video where Paul Hawken is going to share some of the thinking that went into his doing this research.
Drawdown in the context of climate change refers to that first point in time when greenhouse gases peak and go down, measured on a year-to-year basis. It's the turning point, it's the reversal. It's like we've gone far enough, let's go the other way point. I use that term because I feel if you don't name the goal, there's a fat chance you're going to attain it. You just won't reach it because you don't know where you're going. All this is about reframing, really. And it's not just about measuring and modeling. What it is about rethinking our relationship to carbon. No one's ever measured the 100 top solutions. There has been heretofore nowhere where people could go and get scientifically peer-reviewed, data on the solutions themselves. Where we can get everywhere is on what's going to happen if we don't address climate change. What I love about Drawdown is, and there's this kind of mindset that there's some technique or silver bullet or direct air capture or that we're going to invent something. It's just completely the opposite. And that is that everything has to change, but not change because it's bad. It's just change because we can do better.
The power of what Paul Hawken has done, it came about in a couple of ways. First, I want to repeat what he said. You have to name the goal. You have to have an idea, what kind of world do we need? So that everything we do politically is oriented to solving our real problems. And that tends to have a unifying effect. It gets it away from fighting each other and us working together to solve our real problems. The second thing is that he took a very different understanding. He said, up until now, we've been focusing on the fact that the last 200 years, we've been putting more and more carbon into the air, which is certainly true. And the focus on the solutions has been, let's pull it back out of the air. let's not put it in the air. He said, but over those same 200 years, we've been destroying the capacity of the planet to pull carbon out of the air. If our solutions look at both how to keep from putting more in, how to reduce our usage of it, and how to restore the trees, the soil, all of the ways that nature naturally, annually restores the breathability of the atmosphere. You see on the slide, there's an annual cycle. What you're looking at right now with the red on the top, that is the worst. That's the middle of winter in the northern part of the world, and it's all about carbon. And we're heating everything to stay warm, so it gets really bad. However, the earth breathes. And over its annual cycle, as spring comes, the green starts growing again. It starts pulling it back out of, and you can see that on the next slide, that the atmosphere becomes, the red is carbon, and that's what it looks like at the best time of year in terms of balance. So what we're doing in this work now, drawdown, is building up the ability of the planet to pull back the carbon out of the earth. The last part of what he did is he said he kept talking to people for years now. Nobody had solutions that were anywhere near what the problem demanded. So over the last 3 years, he's worked with over 200 scientists, experts, social scientists, economists from all over the world who worked together, and they, with a very tough-minded approach, identified 80 solutions, each one of which they documented, and they played it really low. They lowballed it. They were very tough-minded and conservatives in their estimate. And what they did was say, this is how much tonnage of carbon will either not go into the atmosphere if we do this, or get pulled back out of it if we do. And then they looked at, if you add up all that tonnage, if we actually took each of these 80 solutions to scale, what would happen? And he said, in a generation, we would have the carbon back to where it was when we started the Industrial Revolution. And within a generation later, the temperatures will gradually be dropping back to what is really sustainable for us. The interesting thing is, as he looked at them, first of all, I've got up there, he looked at all of the ways nature renews itself. You can find this on his website. You can buy his book, but all of the solutions are also on the website, Drawdown. And if we can look at the next slide, he found that some of the solutions were really surprising. For one thing, regenerative farming, in fact, all but 2 of the solutions are more than win-win. Every one of them better meets our human needs, feeds us better, clothes us better, gives us more security, and helps restore the health of the planet. So there's not a trade-off here. It's win-win. Far more important even than transportation is what we do with our food. The amount of food we waste, about 1/3 of the food grown every year is wasted. In the industrial countries, it's wasted because we throw it away. And in the poor countries, it just doesn't get from the farm to the people. There are too many losses. He also discovered, guess what? If you put 2 of the solutions together, the top solution in the world is educating women and girls and providing reproductive services. In fact, a lot of the solutions are not, in the usual sense of the word, technological, or they're social technologies. They're redesigning our social systems. Now, all of that said, that is what Hawken is really, really good at. And then he stops. He gives you the economics. He says, this is what it would cost. This is what it would benefit economically. And here is what it would produce in the way of restoration of the health of the planet. But then he stops. He never talks politics. He never talks power. So what's left then that we're going to address in this program is, how do you make it happen when so many of the biggest and most powerful systems are going absolutely the other way? How do we turn that around? And the answer is, we, the people of the world, everywhere, at all levels, are coming together, including today in this studio. We're here to help change the story. There are 8 volunteers who've given up their Saturday afternoon and many other afternoons to learn the skills and provide the support. And the focus of this show is change the story, change the future. Our show also is blessed by a wonderful co-host whose name is Leanne Nurse, who lives in Washington, D.C. Leanne and I, who've worked together for 10, 12, 15 years on these sorts of solutions, can be part of the process of bringing it to you all. And she's particularly tuned in to things happening all over the world on these things.
Nancy, and to the people both in the studio and in the community there near Santa Cruz, thank you for this opportunity to participate in the discussion about the future we need and how we can get it. I work for a federal agency as an environmental protection specialist, but prior to government, I also had a career in broadcast journalism, and prior to that, as a community organizer and community development specialist. So when Nancy said that Matilda had invited her to do this series, I was very, very excited because this is a conversation in changing our stories that opens our eyes to what's possible, mostly because, as Nancy said, and as Paul Hawken is demonstrating, many people are already doing this work around the world. I have helped change some of the rules here in our country about how that work gets done, specifically on issues of transparency and public participation, and also more recently in the work of climate change adaptation, which helps local communities prepare for the changing climate. So we don't have to worry that something is about to happen. Many of us are already experiencing extreme weather, flooding, wildfires that are far more extreme than they have been in the past. So I appreciate the opportunity to work with you and to work with Nancy during this series.
Part of the reason I wanted to work with you on this is, as we both know, you've had a chance to travel around the world carrying this message. I've had a little bit of a chance myself. And when I say everyone is waking up, the point is, when we are facing these things at 3 a.m., we feel we're alone. We're starting from scratch and we're saying, oh my God, how could we possibly do it? And we're alone, or we're working with a handful of others. And several years ago, Paul Hawken wrote another book called Blessed Unrest. And he said there are literally millions of people and hundreds of thousands of movements occurring all over the world in all parts of society at all levels. And two of the stories that I wanted to share with you, because they are an example of that, we're going to look at now. One of the videos is of young people in a refugee camp in Somalia.
Nancy, thank you for sharing the story of the Youth Climate Dialogue. The most important thing about the Youth Climate Dialogue is it gives us hope in the face of severe and cruel circumstances. The students who are at the refugee camp, if you imagine today and said, well, I'm going to listen to some kids from a refugee camp, one might say, well, what can they do? They're in a camp. But we see that Usman and his initiative to become a motivational speaker, and Aisha, who is looking forward to becoming a social worker, have big dreams. And they understand that this one planet that we share together is something that we must find a way to care for. We also must find ways to prepare for the changes we've already put into place. They can't do it by themselves, and they can't just do it mostly because they're so young. On the other hand, what this story shows us is they have used their energy, their agency, to take the initiative and begin the dialogue. The fact that they're doing it across borders and across cultures reminds us as adults how critical it is to look and speak and to engage with people who aren't like us, who have a different experience, and find new solutions. This is just one of the many stories that we'll be looking at throughout the series. And Nancy, I really look forward to continuing this discussion.
So do I. So what I want to tell you is what I've learned so far. Going back to the 5 disabling beliefs, what I have learned is we can restore the earth and meet all our real human needs. We already have workable solutions to most of our problems. The challenge is to bring them to scale. We have the money we need. We just have to spend it in the right places. We have the power we need. We just have to use it. We have to know what we're going after, name it, our goals, and the best ways to get there. And above all, we have to know that even if it's very hard and far from certain, it really is possible. And we have to know we can work together. If we focus on our real needs and the real solutions, stop debating, stop dissing, and start designing the kind of world we need. So each month we will be looking at a different one of the sources of citizen power. We focus in on just what changes to each of these systems are going to get us where we need to be. And here's the best part, for every one of these systems change targets, there are active campaigns already ongoing all over the world. Campaigns whose goals are clear and within reach, and whose methods are strategically sound. And each of them has versions going on right here on the Central Coast. Campaigns many of us are already involved in. So my point here is not to urge new actions on you, but to show you how the actions you are or can already be a part of are each of them part of a larger whole. I have found so many proven solutions with so many stories and strategies, links and resources. I started mapping them out just to keep them all straight. Then the map itself became more and more central. It helped me see how all the different issues and actions were related and how successes in any one area could greatly leverage successes elsewhere. Not only were the many different kinds of actions and priorities not in conflict with each other, as we can often think, oh, my way or your way. No, they needed each other. They reinforced each other, so much so that taken as a whole, as they interconnect, not just here, but everywhere, new systems may surprise as they start to emerge spontaneously, because that's how living systems are, ever adapting, ever evolving to meet new needs and opportunities. Something amazing just might emerge. We might discover sometime in this generation or the next, the one after that, or the one after that, that we actually have managed to turn it around and make a future that works. Not one that's perfect, not utopia. We human beings will still be all too human, but at least one where the very systems we have to live with are no longer working against us. Maybe a system that at least makes it possible for us to be our better selves a lot more of the time. How we think about things, what we think, is even possible? What matters? The story that we are changing. We have the power to change, first of all, our thinking. And our beliefs, our ideas are funny things. They can last 2,000 years through thick and thin. We will die for them. We will live for them. We will kill for them. And they can change in short time. The changes, let's say, just in our attitudes towards gender and sexuality in this country and around the world is a profound change in our understandings that is opening up all sorts of freedom. The Enlightenment thinking itself turned a world that took slavery and abuse absolutely for granted into one in which, even though we haven't achieved our ideals yet, we now take for granted that that is not how the world should be. That is a major move forward. We also have before us tools and connections and possibilities like we have, and ideals like have never been available to us before to achieve the future we need. So join us once a month and come to our website and work with us to share what you know about how to make this happen. The website is future-we-need.tv. On Monday nights following each month's show, almost all of them, the first Monday nights of the month, at the Quaker Meeting House, we will be meeting as a strategic action circle to view this together, this show together, and talk about its implications for our own lives and work. And we'll be using for that discussion a citizen action field manual that is a work in progress. All of this, the website, each of these things is still in the very, very early stages. It doesn't yet do what I hope it will, but it's enough to get us going. And you are all so welcome to give your thoughts, your advice, your support. And I want to say how utterly grateful I am for all the dozen or more people that have made this possible. And Paul Hawken, I want to give him the last word once again. He says, what if global warming is not an obstacle, but an opportunity to innovate and reimagine everything we make and do, and I might add, and are. Thank you.